Um, well, welcome everybody. I think that you all got an email from Andrew saying that indeed it would be not he, but me that would be welcoming you to this episode of the KatchU speaker series. And that's because I had the great honor of being able to invite our esteemed speaker today, someone I'm fortunate to call a friend. And so it only seemed fitting that I also don the role of the interviewer and give Andrew a little much deserved break. So indeed, our guest today is a most esteemed gentleman, a legendary actor of film, television, the stage, video games, narration, and pretty much anything an actor can do. This man has done it all with skill and aplomb that has earned him a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, among many, many awards and accolades. He's the only guy I know that's on a first name basis with Beethoven. So please give a warm, virtual KatchU welcome to the great Malcolm McDowell.
Cheers, cheers, claps, no booze. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome, Malcolm. It's really so good of you to take some time to speak with us here at KatchU. You've got a lot of fans among our 100+ film interns from 40 universities and 16 countries. This, in these little boxes, is the future of the entertainment industry. And I know how thrilled they are to get a chance to meet you virtually. So, and they've also submitted some great questions, which we'll hopefully get to. So, of course, we're going to step back into your illustrious career and your catalog of work over the past 50+ years. Sorry to rub that in.
Not at all.
Let's start, but let's start here in the here and now. These crazy months of COVID. How have they impacted your work? I'm sure a lot, but what specifically has been the impact for you, both as an actor and personally?
Well, I just haven't done, any movies or television shows on screen, but I've been doing loads of recording. So it really hasn't impacted me really that much, to be honest. I live in a very beautiful place, Southern California. The weather's great. I mean, I got a new knee, so I can play golf. So I'm really, I'm really one of the few lucky ones. But, I have a television series called Truth Seekers, which is opening up on Amazon at the end of October. And they've already inquired about season 2. So I know I'm going back to London next May, June, if possible. I mean, or they'll put us in a bubble or something. I don't know, whatever they do, So it's really so strange. It'd be very strange to be in London and to be in a car, then in an apartment, and then the set, and then can't even go out or
can't go to a pub, yeah.
Can't go to do anything. But it's a very good show. I'm rather pleased. It's one of the Simon Pegg, Nick Frost duo who are sort of very famous to sci-fi people. They love them and they are very talented. So I had a lot of fun doing that. But I've got a Roland Joffrey film to do in, I think just before I start that. So I've got a couple of movies to do, then go into the series. So there's lots of stuff piled up.
Right. Once they open the floodgates, you'll be fast back at it.
But things are very different for actors now, and I, for actors that are jobbing actors, working actors, to pay their mortgage, to feed their families, are suffering like everybody else. It's extremely hard and difficult, and they've pretty much shut down all work. In Hollywood, it's just. There's nothing happening at the moment, but hopefully after the second, or is it the third wave, then things will start to open up. I hope,
Yeah, well, it certainly is something that is indeed having such a big impact on all of the arts. I know people in my field of music are suffering just as much, can't do gigs, can't do shows, Broadway and symphonies. Indeed. Well, I was going to come back to your new show at the end, so we'll do a bit of a bookend. You can tell us some sneak peeks on that. But so I know you say you're living in beautiful Southern California in Ojai near Santa Barbara, but of course, as everybody knows, you grew up in merry old England, across the pond. You were born in Yorkshire, but you spent your formative years in Liverpool. You've shared with me, you even got a chance to see those four lads performing at a club called The Cavern, which is beyond cool. Well, I want to come back to that, but just want to know, so growing up in Liverpool in the 1950s, this tough working class, post-war port city, how do you think that affected the kind of actor that you'd become and that the world was sort of ready for?
In the 50s in England, it was very much, you had to have a rather BBC News posh accent, sort of up there somewhere, like sort of got marbles in the mouth, you know. And that's the way actors were. And there was no working class actors per se until, thank God, the revolution of what they call kitchen sink movies, which happened in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. Things like The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, Taste of Honey, and the most important one of all, which was actually a play that changed the whole way that even I think it even changed American ideas too, was Look Back in Anger in 1956, which was a real attack on the establishment.
Right.
And that, you know, after the war in England, there was a malaise, you know, that people coming back from the war expected that things would just be the same. But of course they weren't. And there is much more class divide in England, in that society, than there is here. Although here it's not who your family is, it's more, you know, how much you've got in the bank, basically. Right. Or how much you're allowed to borrow, put it that way.
Yeah, depending on who your dad is, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, that my great hero in English theatre film was an actor, a wonderful actor, one of the greats I've ever seen, called Albert Finney.
Right,
and
sure.
I was a great, great actor and a very nice man. And our paths crossed a few times, actually. And Albert is directly responsible for me being a movie star, in that his production company produced my first movie, which really changed my life overnight because it was a sensation. You know, it was a wonderful film called If.
If, yes. Yeah.
Directed by Lindsay Anderson, who was one of the great directors I've ever worked with and still is.
Yeah, no, I definitely want you to speak a bit more about Lindsay Anderson. I know what an impact he had, but before we do that, let's stay in Liverpool for one more minute. Can you just share, because I know it's just one of those things that we can't even imagine, what it was like, your memory of seeing the Beatles, you know, in the Cavern in '61.
Oh my God! 62. Well, you know, in Liverpool as a teenager, you know, there were 3,000 groups. 3,000. I honestly thought every city was the same. I thought every pub had a live band. I was brought up in a hotel and pub, and we had a live band. And, you know, it was a snoring bulldog here. And so...
Very British.
Yeah. And... so, you know, I had this girlfriend who said, oh, we'll go down to the Cavern. There's a great group. I went, what are they called? Silver Beatles. I went, oh, okay, let's go try it. Now, I'd been educated in the south of England at a private school.
Right.
We call it public school. It's more or less a private school, but not quite. So I went along to this dingy, in the basement sort of wine vault or beer storage vault or something. Right. And it was tiny. It was only, I think, looked to be no more than sort of 50 feet long by 25, 30 feet. It was just, and it had a small platform at one end, which was the stage, which was like 9 inches, you know, above the floor.
Sure.
And the place was completely packed with, you know, very lively people who did what they called the Liverpool stomp, which was you hopped from one foot to the other to the music because there was no room to do anything else.
That's all you could do.
And it was called the stomp. And so we'd all stomp, and I went, they were on every Friday night. And I went back religiously because I loved them. You know, they had this raw energy, which was amazing. And they were very together as a band.
Sure.
I didn't understand, you know, things like that. I just knew that I liked listening to them.
So you didn't
really
necessarily know, because you thought every city was like Liverpool that had 3,000
Yeah.
bands. Did you, I mean, were you surprised that they ended up taking over the world as they did?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, because don't forget, when I saw them, even though I knew they were good, but they were, you know, in the leathers, the DA haircuts, the drainpipe trousers, they were, you know, spivs, yobs. And and John Lennon particularly, you know, was smoking, and he's the first person I ever heard really blaspheme on a stage, and he really gave it some. And I mean, it was sort of like, what? But hey, yeah, you know, why not?
I can dig it.
And
Yeah.
they sang all covers. They were all Chuck Berry, you know, the Little Richard stuff, Elvis, of course.
Of course, yeah.
And stuff that they had perfected in Hamburg. Now, I didn't know, you know, the whole Hamburg history then, but after about 6 visits, the next time I came, they had all the shampooed hair that sort of...
Oh, the Brian Epstein impact, yeah.
Exactly. And I thought, what the hell happened? Somebody's gotten hold of them, you know. They've ruined them, you know.
Right. They made them proper.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we could go for very long on that whole part of your life, but I want to talk about you. So you mentioned going to boarding school down in, or public school down in Kent. You know, I know it may not have been the easiest time. You may not have been the best student. Maybe you picked up a few things from John Lennon, but that's also where you decided you wanted to become an actor. What was it that triggered you from working at your dad's pub to saying, I want to be on the stage?
Well, the headmaster of the school I was at was a total theater nut, and took people that were sort of interested to the Old Vic to see Olivier in all his great glory, you know, and took us to the Royal Shakespeare Company at Stratford-on-Avon, which, funnily enough, 10 years later, I was a member of.
Right.
But I wasn't to know that then. But so he cast me in we did 2 shows in our school. Well, there was the musical at Christmas, and then the Shakespeare in the summer. And so I got to play all the great parts in Shakespeare before I was 18, you know, so extraordinary. And I, you know, I started when I was 11. He cast me as the lead in the musical Aladdin. And I was very, very nervous. I had no idea what to expect. I was a little bit miffed because all my friends were playing rugby, and I was looking out of the window during rehearsals going, oh, I'm stuck here doing this gibberish, you know. And it was gibberish. Songs like Appy, Appy, Pum, Pay, that is all I've got to say, Yicky, Dacky, Dick, Dack, Do, or something, you know, one of those. And
it left quite an impression on you. Just
complete gibberish. And but it's funny, I didn't really enjoy that much the rehearsal process. But as soon as I walked on the stage and the lights hit and that sort of void, and knowing there's an electric kind of atmosphere because there's audience and people out there and they're all looking at moi, suddenly I felt completely relaxed and at home.
Huh.
And it was just, I remember it to this day, exactly going, I have total control here. I can say whatever I want. You know, the headmaster was on the piano looking up, and I went, no, I can. And I would go off and ad-lib stuff. And he didn't seem to mind. He never said a word.
No, I've actually never heard you sing, so we're going to have to sort of see what we can do about that. Now, you obviously did, aside from musicals, you say that you performed Shakespeare early on. You did become part of the Royal Shakespeare Company. Did you? Was that I mean, you did end up working with Olivier a little bit. Was that an aspiration, or did you always know that you wanted to make your way to the screen?
It was a stepping stone to the screen. I was much more interested in film. But, you know, in England, it was all theatre. Theatre, theatre, theatre. That's where the real actors are. But the truth was, I was interested in Jimmy Cagney. I was interested in, you know, Bogey and all those great American Hollywood movies of the 40s, 50s, 60s.
Right.
And so, and you know, an English film started to get a lot better instead of being these awful drawing room comedies where people sat around with cups of tea and discussed the weather. There were suddenly these, as I said, these kitchen sink dramas that were actually showing what real people were like. I remember Albert did a movie called Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. And I saw this film at the Odeon Cinema in Lime Street, Liverpool. And I was completely stunned. And at the end of the film, I sat in the seat for a long time. And I just said to myself, you know, Albert's paved the way. Now I can do it. And I'm going to London to do it.
Path. Wow.
Yeah. And it's really exactly the same story that Gary Oldman had when he watched me on.
That's right. I've heard him say that. He
owes
his career to you.
Yeah. I mean, well, listen, it is, our job is to pass the baton, you know, and that's what we do. And it's sort of fun, you know.
Well, clearly you had, aside from the desire to be in the spotlight, you had that je ne sais quoi that got you the attention of people. You had some pretty big breaks early on. You had mentioned, so in 1968, you landed your first big role in If, working with Lindsay Anderson, and that in turn brought you to the attention of Kubrick in A Clockwork Orange in 71. So I want to get to those films a little bit, but so what you mentioned Albert Finney. So was that the the model you took? What were some of the other approaches that you said, I want to become somebody that people pay attention to? What were those parts of your craft you honed?
Well, you know, when I was at Stratford, for instance, I was a very young member, and you know, I had like 12 lines as the Duke of Clarence in Henry V, which I think was actually anyway made up, rewritten by a director called John Barton, who was a sort of legend there, one of the great scholars of Shakespeare, you know. Right. I realized very soon that I did not like these big autocratic companies that had 120 actors, that were behemoths, that were just really, it was like working for the government. Well, it was working for the government because they were paying for it.
BBC, yeah.
It was so anti art or cutting edge. Now, you know, I'm generalizing, of course, because they did some great productions. And one of them was Peter Brook's The Marat Sade, right, which I very nearly got into, but they split the company into two, and I went with the other lot, unfortunately. But the one great thing, I was able to be in Ian Holmes' Henry V, and I considered him, again, one of the great actors of his generation. And Ian was, I watched him from the wings every night I could.
Wow.
And because he was such a magnificent actor, and just watching how he did it. I mean, of course, I never found out how he did it, because he just did it. And he was the sweetest guy. I used to play tennis with him on Sundays. And
it's a good way to learn.
Yeah. he was very sweet to the young actors, and you know, he was a little bit older. Sadly, he passed away this year, but he was one of the great actors. You know, and weirdly enough, I guess a few years later, when I was going to see Kubrick, when he'd asked me to do Clockwork Orange, Alex, in that film, I met Ian Holm, strangely enough, in Notting Hill Gate. I was shopping, and there was Ian, and I hadn't seen him in a few years.
Right.
And I was so happy to see him, and you know, and we talked on the street, and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, actually, I'm going out to this man, Stanley Kubrick." And I saw him react, and I said, "Well, yes, you know him, right? He's done 2001, this great movie." And
right.
He went, "Oh, Malcolm, you watch that son of a bitch." I went, "What?" He goes, "I've been out to his house for 18 months. He cast me as Napoleon." And he said, "I've been, you know, out to the house. I know the family. I've had many dinners out there, you know." And then suddenly I couldn't get him on the phone.
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh, damn."
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I do want to talk about obviously your experience working with Stanley, with Kubrick, but let's come back to that director that I know was like a mentor to you. You called him almost like a father figure, a poet, and that's Lindsay Anderson. You did 3 films, starting with If, which really is such a, you know, sort of revered classic today, kind of counterculture. What did you learn from him in terms of, you know, being an actor, about life, about being in entertainment, that really lived on with you?
He really, he taught me so much without teaching. You know, you're just observing him and working with him. I mean, he'd say, "Well, do you want to be a film actor?" And I said, "No, I want to be an actor in film, preferably." And he'd say, "Well, do you know anything about it?" "Oh, all right." Then he'd quiz me. He'd say, "Oh," he just, you know, he just quizzed me about other actors who, of course, I hadn't got a clue who they were. And I tried to sort of, you know, bullshit my way a bit, but he'd always catch me out. And, you know, this was at a dinner with other people. He'd completely tried to humiliate me, but I didn't mind. I didn't mind because I was next to the candle. And he was the great shining light. And why he was so great is that not only was he a brilliant, instinctive director, he was also a poet. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
That really separates him. I mean, that's what he told me about John Ford, who was his favorite director of all time, and he wrote a book about him, which is a very, very good book, incidentally. And I said to him, "Why do you like John Ford so much?" He goes, "Well, Malcolm, there are many great directors, very few poets. John Ford was both."
Yeah. Well, it's great that you paid it forward. You did a documentary on him and a one-man show. So I guess on the opposite side of that early career was working with Kubrick. Part of the big training for the media genome that we do here at Catch, we study deeply his The Shining. Is 9 years later, but a lot of this really the same Kubrick trademarks of the the framing of the shots, the vibrant colors, the odd angles. But we've also are aware of some of the, you know, really kind of disturbing stories of how he'd torment his actors like Shelley Duvall in The Shining. And he had these long shoots, a year, 18 months, where he'd kind of hold you captive. So what was your experience like working with Kubrick, and what did he teach you that you ended up sort of taking forward as a clue for how to survive in this industry?
Well, he was also, of course, you know, Stanley was, in his own way, of course, he was a genius, as we know. What he could do with cameras and the technical side of filmmaking, Stanley was light years ahead of anyone else, and still is probably. In fact, there'd be no Star Wars without 2001. And if you look at 2001 today, it's still better in terms of the special effects than all these computer generated things that I think look so fakey. But of course, I'm old school, so what do I know? But I mean, for instance, and Christiana told me this, that the end of 2001 is the explosion and the black hole and the whole, and that was shot over her kitchen sink. They had a pan of boiling water about an inch deep that was smoking, and they had the flame on, so that was always steaming, and they put these little droppers of colored food extract and glycerines and all these colors and swirling mass, and that, when on a 70-foot screen, looked absolutely amazing and otherworldly. And it was done on her kitchen stove.
Yeah, it
But
was.
Stanley knew, who would have thought of that? I think it's just extraordinary. But the thing was, why I think I worked so well with him, that he sort of left me alone to do the sort of acting side of it. And so, I remember saying to him, Stanley, we've talked a lot about, extraneous stuff about the film, but what about the character of Alex? And he goes, well, that's why I hired you. And he just turned off and walked away. Huh. And I went, well, that's funny, because I thought you were the director. How about some direction? And, I used to tease him a lot, but the truth is that really it was a collaboration, because, for instance, I was leaving one night after dinner, and he walked me to my car. And he said, and I said to him, well, what do you think we should wear? I've been thinking. And he goes, I don't know. He goes, what have you got? And I went, what have I got? I mean, I'm not costume. I don't know. It's a futuristic thing. The only thing I've got are my cricket whites in the car. He goes, show me. So I put them on for him. He goes, what's this? I said, well, that's the protector, And he goes, wear it on the outside. And that became the iconic look, with the whites, with the boots, and then the bowler and the eyelash. And the eyelash, I found that in this boutique called Bieber. And at the cash register, it had a yard of eyelash. And I went, good Lord, this is so wild. So this was in the 60s, the dolly rockers, girls with their mini skirts and the whole swinging London thing. And I took this yard of eyelash to Stanley as a kind of fun present thing. And he looked at it and he goes, put it on. So I went, I don't know how to put this on with this glue and everything. So I got one eventually on. He took a photograph of it. Then I got both on, and he called me the next day and he goes, you're just going to wear one eyelash because of it. He goes, I see in your face there's something wrong, and I'm not quite sure what it is. So that's how that came about.
It is such a distinctive look. It really does define that. What an interesting thing. It is collaboration.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. So it definitely seems like it was a positive, healthy relationship for you.
Fantastic. Look, I mean, if you see the film, I had my arguments with him later. But
well, that's to be expected.
Of course, I totally love the man. I just adored him, and he was so different from sort of people that I knew, Lindsay, people of the theater. He could care less about. And, and I'd call him and say, look, cast Philip Stone as my father. He's so good. And, take a month. And then he goes, yeah, well, I got him on tape. And
how great.
I cast him. And then he casts him in The Shining. He's in everything.
Yeah.
He's in Barry Lyndon as well.
Right, yeah.
And Warren Clark, I begged him to use Warren, and he wouldn't go see him in this play. And I went, go see him in this play, Home, David's story, directed, incidentally, by Lindsay. And he wouldn't go. He hated the theater, which is so weird to me. But anyway, he wouldn't go. 5 months, we couldn't cast this part. And then I was over at his house, and the intercom went, and his secretary said, Warren Clark's here, Stanley. And I thought, you fucker. And I'm thinking, so Warren Clark finally is here. And Stan looked at me and he goes, do you want to say hi? I went, yeah, why not? And of course, we read the scene and he goes, this guy's great. What shall I do? And I went, how about telling him he's got the part? So we went back in the room and he said, I'd like to offer you the part. No, he hated doing that. He hated any kind of, he's always wanted to be withdrawn from that kind of thing, you know.
Well, you've told some great anecdotes in other interviews I've seen. For example, the incredible scene where you had those eyelid sort of devices during the Ludovico treatment. It actually was a bit of a risk to you. That must have that was real, sort of having faith that he that he knew what he was doing.
Well, you know, he showed me a picture of a patient with these lid locks, you know, and I said, oh my God, that's scary. And he said, no, I mean, you know, could you do that? And I went, what? With these things in my eyes? No, there's no way. I mean, I couldn't do that. And he goes, I've got a doctor from Moorfields Eye Hospital coming by tomorrow to talk to you. And I went, oh, Stanley, I don't think so. So this guy comes, a very young guy. He's actually in the movie, the doctor in the movie. And he said, oh, no, we do these, you know, operations. We put these things in all the time. I'm going to anesthetize your eye, so you won't even feel a thing. I went, oh. Now, what he forgot to tell me was usually patients are on their backs, not sitting up watching movies. And these lid locks kept sliding out. And of course, I didn't feel that they were dragging across my corneas, scratching them every time they fell out. And I remember saying to Stanley, look, I think I can only do 10 minutes of this. You've got to get the whole thing, set all your cameras up. I can only do 10 minutes of this. And sure enough, I got the whole scene. I did the whole thing. And so I went home. The guy looked at my eyes. He goes, oh, little scratch. He goes, put some ointment in it. You should be okay. I mean, driving into my street in central London, suddenly I felt like there was a razor blades cutting through my body and my eyes. And I started to scream.
Oh my gosh.
I've never known pain like it. Thank God my family, my doctor, who was a great guy, and, you know, I used to get drunk with him occasionally. And that's the kind of doctor I had. I said, right. Doc,
back in the day,
you've got to come over. I'm in such pain, this fuck. And he came around, he gave me a shot of morphine. And literally the next morning I woke up, and even though I felt like my eyes were full of sand, at least it had repaired itself enough. But it was horrible.
The sacrifices one does for art.
Yeah, and Stanley was like, he called me and goes, how you feel? I went, Stanley, that was horrendous. He went, oh, okay, well, you're not going to work. I went, today? Good God, I can barely see out. He goes, okay, listen, I want to change a couple of sets. So, you know, just stay out for the week. We'll get it on the insurance. So he was thrilled.
He was thinking multiple planes, including
money.
business.
Yeah.
Money. Well, really quite incredible. Obviously, that certainly launched your career, and you obviously were very, very busy. You've stayed very busy, and you've between characters, say of Mick Travis and obviously Alex Delarge, and then of course infamously there was Caligula, Paul and Cat People, Dr. Soren in Star Trek, even Murdoch and Bombshell. You've played in your career some pretty juicy bad guys. So was that something that you kind of recognize? Okay, I've got a real skill here. I'm going to hone in on my ability to play the unsavory character. Or did that just was that just a happenstance, the roles that you got offered?
You can only play what you're offered. Excuse me. And if you launch your career, you know, in such a way like I did with Clockwork Orange, that was the sort of international huge, you know, hit. That's all basically they want you to play for the, and you know, I'm really not a very good. I'm more of a maverick. I really, you know, I haven't. If I have enough money just to pay my bills and stuff, I don't care. I just want to find interesting, rather risque, hence Caligula, projects that will either sink or swim. You know, you've got to go for it. You've got to live dangerously, and right. You know, because otherwise you just end up playing the same damn part. And I'm really not interested in that. And I'm 77, and I'm still not interested in it.
Well, really, I mean, as advice to these young people, you think about how it can be easy to be pigeonholed, to be stereotyped, to be locked into something. How do you avoid that? Do you turn things down? Do you insist to your agent, I don't want to do that? Give me something that's the opposite of what I just did?
Look, you know, I was in a very privileged position, is that I was in a huge hit. And so I could turn things down, and did many, many times. So I would look for stuff that was a little more out there, and something that would challenge me, you know, and give me a variety of stuff. I just didn't want to repeat. And, you know, so I looked for other stuff. And for instance, Time After Time, which is a very sweet film that I made in San Francisco, H.G. Wells, is so different from anything I'd done up to that point. And I was so thrilled, because I thought, well, hopefully this will be a hit, and then they'll offer me all these goodies, you know. But it wasn't a hit. So I went back to, you know, doing the other stuff. But I mean, in the end of the day, you have to work.
Right.
You can't be stupid, but, you know, I've tried to sort of tread an independent path as much as I can.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being in films that have some controversy, because they're talking about you, and it helps your.
There's nothing wrong in that, and there's also nothing wrong in being in big blockbusters. You know, being in the mainstream. My God, I wish I'd had a few more of those.
Nice work, if you can get it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, look, when I was a young actor, I would have been happy to take a radio play, you know, on the BBC. It's all a matter of where you're at, you know, in your life.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, if I could, you know, because I was a messenger, I was doing a waiter, I worked in a pub, I did this while I was auditioning in London, and, you know, like every actor. And I remember thinking to myself, if I could just earn enough money to pay these bills every month without having to worry, I think I will have really made it, you know.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that worked out all right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of, you know, commercial and a little bit more outside the mainstream, a genre that you've done quite a bit of is horror. And I know we've got a lot of horror fans and future practitioners here at KatchU. We've got a whole discussion group about it. So I know a lot of people are interested. Obviously, you know, with the Rob Zombie remakes of Halloween, and mentioned Cat People and Vamps.
Yeah.
So as a film consumer, are you a fan of horror? Do you, when you've got a Friday night, do you put on a horror film? Is this...
No, I'm not a great fan of horror. I like really psychological horror movies, you know, like Rosemary's Baby. I think it's one of the great horror movies, you know. But Rob's are hard for me. It's like, wow, I mean, any more blood in this? I mean, you're swimming in it. It's but I love working with him. You know, I found Rob such a nice guy and so much fun to work with. And I had a great time doing those two films, you know. And he's certainly a talented guy, very talented.
Well, and so having worked in horror, I mean, you've seen obviously a variety. What would be some advice you would give to those in the? How do you avoid making, I don't know, a campy horror film? I mean, what are the ingredients for a great? Is it that psychological element that gives it something a little bit for the brain as well as the gut?
You know, it's honestly, you're interpreting somebody's written word. It's not really up to you. You just have to play the truth. And that's the same for any genre. If it's a comedy, you can't go around being funny. You have to play the truth of it. If the writing is smart and funny, you'll look like a brilliant comedian.
Right.
It doesn't mean to say you are, but you know,
It helps.
it helps. Same with horror, you know, you have to play the truth of it, not worry about, you know, all the rest of it. That's up to the director and the writers and all the rest of it. So an actor's job is, you know, in theater, your preoccupation is with the author, the playwright. That is who you, you know, are responsible to. And the other actors and the director, of course, but mainly the playwright. In film, it's to the director.
The director, right.
Who is, especially in Europe, more an auteur. You know, he's the author of it. It's his you know, view of it, of whatever it is. So, but in Hollywood, it's more, you know, made by committee, which is quite different, but still can be great. I mean, but there are, of course, great Hollywood directors, and I've worked with a few, and I had just as much fun working with, well, the best comedy director I ever worked with was Blake Edwards.
Sure.
Who'd done, of course, you know, the Pink Panthers.
Right.
But I loved him. He was so great. We literally could barely get through the day without roaring with laughter about stories about Peter, mainly Sellers,
right. Yeah,
who was a total crazy lunatic, you know.
What a genius, yes, for comedy.
A genius, but you know, on the spectrum. I mean, he was completely. I knew him quite well, you know.
I was going to ask, yeah.
We had the same agent, so, and the agent used to come in and goes, "Malk, we've got dinner tomorrow night with Peter." And I went, "Oh God, where are we going?" Same restaurant. He wants you there. He says you're in a very exclusive club. You've starred in Stanley Kubrick movies.
You right. Past
but you know, I'd go to dinner and Peter would have his head on the table and wouldn't talk to anyone, wouldn't order. All the food would come and his plate would be cold. And we're at a 3-star restaurant. You know, this is
right.
ICM are paying for this. And he was, and then suddenly, click, he would kind of come to, wake up, boom, and then go into, and then we'd have a huge laugh about Stanley, you know, whatever it was. And I liked him a lot. He was a very interesting man. I had one great dinner. The agent, Dennis Selinger was his name, had a 70th birthday for his sister in a private room in this this restaurant called Julie's. And he invited like 20 people, his clients and stuff. There was, you know, Sean Connery, Michael Caine, and I think Roger Moore, all these people with their wives. And I was there with, and I was doing this movie. So I took the star of it with me, the girl I was opposite, Lynn Frederick. And anyway, we went and they put me next to Peter, you know, because of our association.
Right, your friendship.
And of course, he head on the table, he was out of it. And there's 20 people were all laughing and, you know, and they're telling stories and blah, blah. I was talking to the guy on my other side, who was some producer or something, I can't remember. But suddenly one of the women on the opposite side of the table jumped up and said she'd lost a diamond stud. It had fallen out and everyone started. And suddenly Peter came to. He did 20 minutes stand up as Inspector Clouseau.
Looking for the stud.
accusing everyone of theft.
Right. Oh my
And
gosh.
it was like watching a genius. It was what it must have been like watching Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Wow.
beyond, I mean, the talent was just beyond anything.
Yeah,
And
today that would have been on the iPhone. It would have been
yeah, of course,
videotaped, but now it just lives in your
of course.
memory.
It's in the memory. And, you know, I took Lynn, and so Sellers turned to me and he goes, you know, Malcolm, I can go into a room of 40 women and I'll go up to the one woman who's poisonous for me and I'll ask her to marry me.
And
I went,
she'll
oh,
say
really?
yes.
Well, he got together that night with Lynn and married her.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It was
Well, I guess
great.
a bit of being there was came to
Yeah.
life, his character. Well, let's move a little bit because again, your career is so eclectic. Let's move from film to television. I know you've been working in television going back to the beginning. I think your earliest credits were on television in '67.
Mm-hmm.
And through the years, you've continued to work. You've done cameos in all of the biggest hit shows, Frasier and Monk and South Park. But you've also landed some great roles as a recurring character, including some really, I think, innovative shows like Entourage and Mozart in the Jungle. What are some of the biggest differences in your perspective as an actor in this collaborative interplay between the director and the writers and you that's different between film and television?
You know, I like television so much because, you know, television is at its best. It's where all the great writers are. You know, there's no independent movies anymore. And I think cable has taken up the slack. Cable is where all the really interesting subjects are. Mozart in the Jungle, for one. I mean, right. Where could you get to do that, you know?
Yeah,
and not only, you know, a movie is just 2 hours and you've got to tell the whole story, but with a series, you can go on and on and on and really discover and explore. And it's so much fun. It's more like doing theater. You know, you have your established cast and you're all great family, you know. And I think, well, Mozart was a great example, but Entourage, I think, kind of started, I mean, the writing was brilliant.
Right, so fast.
It was so good, and it was one of the first, you know, really great comedies on HBO. Right. I think it was HBO.
Yeah.
And then I did Heroes and had a really, really good part on that. And then I did a series for 4 years that nobody saw, but I didn't quite know why they kept upping it, but it was called Franklin and Bash about
Franklin
a law
and Bash. I think I've told you that was one of my wife and I looked so forward every week to that show, and we were so upset when it got canceled. And your character was just great.
I know. I love that character. Terrific writers, terrific script. Those two boys were brilliant. The chemistry, they're incredible. And then, you know, doing Mozart. So, and then this film with Nick Frost, you know, and Simon Pegg, the series. So, you know, I've been very, very lucky on television, and I really do love it. You really get to explore, and you know, they'll listen to you, and you can have input and stuff.
Right, you've probably helped to shape your characters in a way that you can't do if you're on on the set of a film, and you've got a limited time and a limited scope.
You know, but of course, I'm talking, you know, an experienced actor and all the rest of it. And for the students or the young actors, you know, listen, you just need to work.
Right.
And I really don't care what it is that whatever it is, you learn more actually from the disasters than from the successes. It is your responsibility as an actor to work. It can be a voiceover. It can be, I don't care, you're sweeping the floor in a theater. But just to be around it, to smell it, to be part of it, you've got to do that. You have your life. You can't do anything else. An actor has to be in that position. But really, it's sink or swim. And, you know, that there's nothing else on earth you could do. I mean, that's the way I felt, you know, that my father kept saying, well, give it 5 years. And I'm thinking, yeah, 5 years. Well, you know, I was an actor for 4 years before I got my first big break,
right,
in a movie,
yeah.
you know, and it felt like, of course, forever.
Right.
But when you look back, it's nothing. 4 years. Nothing.
Well, I mean, part of what I was going to get to is what is your advice, you know, for these young creative people, for how do you launch yourself into a long sustained career? And it basically is what you're saying is, you know, don't be afraid to take anything, because everything is going to give you some level of experience and insight.
Exactly. And you know, take classes, do whatever. You know, I took a few classes that were ridiculous, you know. One of them was on the method. That was the, you know, big thing in New York. Oh, the method, you know, American actors. Ooh, the method, you know, Brando. And of course, Brando would have been brilliant, whether he had the method or not. He was a genius, you know. And so was, you know, there's a few anyway, but James Dean was another great. But, and you know, so I went to a class on the method, and, you know, they wanted me to be a lamppost and all kinds of weird stuff, you know, and I was like, it just didn't jive with me at all. They went, what are you doing, McDowell? What on earth? I said, well, I'm a lamppost. And here comes a dog and it's taking a piss on me and I'm trying to get out of the way. There was a lamppost, it doesn't do that. I went, oh, okay.
Well, that reminds me of a story I heard you say about the set of Caligula, and when your dad came.
Oh yeah. True. Oh, I forgot that story. Yeah. No, I know that was quite something. Well, there's a good case in point. You know, taking a risk, doing this thing. I mean, the risk I took though was really agreeing to do it to Gore Vidal. Who, let's face it.
Oh, was he the one that actually asked you to do it?
He cast me. I mean, all the initial meetings were with Gore, and when I signed up, Gore then got himself left.
Yeah.
And I went, Gore, you've got you, and I can't leave because they'll sue the crap out of me, you know. And but still, you know, even though it was horrendous, there was parts of it that were really not.
Yeah.
I mean, living in Italy for almost a year was certainly.
There are worse things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it certainly lives on as a cult classic.
Yeah.
But we're obviously getting toward the end. But again, part of what has made you just such a remarkable actor is both your longevity and your eclecticism. So not only have you done film and television and stage, but you've also gone quite deep into video game work.
Yeah.
And I've got a number of questions. People seem to be very fascinated by your work with Call of Duty. I know my son was very into that. And there was one question by Noah Levine, if he's here. I'm sure he is. Talks about the zombies mode, and I'll read you his question because I don't know. I would love to know what it was like working as the character of Dr. Monty in Black Ops 3, and how Treyarch helped you understand the complex storyline that your character was entering. Malcolm.
That was my question.
Wow. There you are. Okay, well, it's a very good question. And the truth is, I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. I've never played the game, but I did love the character of Monty because he's a sort of godlike figure, and he knows the answer to all the questions. That's the premise I had, and that's how I played him. So he never gets into a sweat about anything. Is always very calm and very whatever, because he knows all, and he controls everything. So if you know that, that's all you need to know, you know. And it was so much fun to play. I even got to sing in it, but I think it's so deep into the game that you probably never can find it.
You have to be really, really good. I don't know if Noah has gotten to hear you sing. I guess somebody will. Yeah.
People found it.
You found it? Well done. Oh,
I didn't find it. People on the internet did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all over. You've got, your voice has gone viral, Malcolm. I can.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it just shows the relevance that you have in generations, sort of across the whole spectrum, which is really, again, such a lesson. And it sounds like what you're just doing in the video game is you're just understanding the character and how you can play.
That's it.
It
doesn't really matter what the delivery system is. It's all the same to me. I mean, obviously, I alter a performance if I'm live in a theater. You know, it's a slight technical difference. You have to be heard. That's, on a film or a television set, you can whisper and be perfectly heard. So you never really have to raise your voice unless it's an emotional moment. But in the theater, you have to project, because your first responsibility is to be heard, is it not? I'm so sick of going to the theater and going, what did he say? God, what the hell? Could you hear that?
Right.
It's so irritating.
Looking for the subtitle button, right?
Yeah. But I think, honestly, if there's one thing I would say to any students is really, and it takes a little while to be able to get the confidence. But really, the thing is, there has to be a tremendous enjoyment and love of what you're doing. So that's the main thing. It's really having fun. And the more fun you have, I don't care if you're playing a serial killer, but if you're having so much fun, then it will come through the eyes, and it'll be very poignant, and it will mean something.
Right. It will
translate. And I honestly look for that in everything. Hey, boys, how are you? Hi, Don. They just got back from their school.
That's sweet.
Yeah. And that's it. So, but of course, at the beginning of your career, you're quite nervous, and it's, and by the way, really work on your auditions, because without them, you're actually getting a foot in the door. I mean, it's no good being brilliant in your bathroom, You've got to work out how you can really audition. I went to an old actor who, for 10 shillings an hour, gave tuition for auditions. And in fact, he found me a piece of Shakespeare that was very obscure. It was the prologue to Henry VIII. I don't even know whether Shakespeare wrote that thing, but I think there's some question about it. But anyway, all I remember is that when I went into audition for the Royal Shakespeare Company, they at least listened because they hadn't heard it for a while. And I remember how it started. One line only is, "I come no more to make you laugh."
That gets your attention.
That gets your attention. And I got in. And I thought, wow, those few lessons were really amazing.
Well, I think that really is, whether you want to be an actor or a director, be prepared when you finally get your moment.
Be ready. Be
ready.
ready.
Because you never know who's going to be watching. You never know who's going to see something in you with you as you exude your confidence that will pay off.
I know. I was amazed that I was even cast by Lindsay Anderson, actually. I mean, of course, as a young actor, I thought, why wouldn't he cast me? I mean, because of course one is totally arrogant and full of oneself. And you have to be, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's not obnoxious. I mean, you can keep it to yourself. I remember thinking, at Stratford-on-Avon, yeah, look at all these idiots, I mean, oh my God, this stuff, it's so old-fashioned. I mean, I'm over this. And and of course, a lot of them are my friends, but
it's not bad work. Yeah.
we made a pact. There were 6 of us to go and give in our, as we called it, our notice. In other words, at the end of this, we're off, because we're actors. We don't want long-term contracts. we're gypsies. We don't want to know what we're doing next year. That's the whole point of being an actor, isn't it?
Right.
And so we all went in, and then we're meeting in the Dirty Duck, the pub afterwards, and they all came in. And they went, well, he offered me, I went, what? You're going back? He went, And I found I was the only one who went, no, I'm done.
You're going to take your chance in the wild world. Yeah. Well, I think that it's paid off. Okay. So just before you leave us, to bring that bookend, you've got Truth Seeker, Truth Seekers, right? With an S?
Truth Seekers. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a comedy horror show. Going to be on Amazon Prime, coming on the eve or the day before Halloween. Who are you playing, and what?
It's a fabulous show. Look, I don't care whether people watch it or not, really. But the truth is, I think it's very, very sweet. It's sort of like a suburban Ghostbusters.
Oh,
and
great.
You've got this guy Nick Frost, who's a total, nerd, and he's into all this paranormal stuff, living in a suburban house with his dad. And you find out that, in fact, well, I won't go into it, but anyway, his dad, and I play his dad.
You play the dad.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun because he's very unlikely, but it's a great relationship, actually, and he, the way they go into, there's been a ghost sighting and this and that, and off they go, and then they go to one of these these convention things and dress up as Daleks or whatever, and of course they take the old man with them, and he's like full of, oh, this is such bull, and then it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like it on television. But what I do like about it, it's very sweet. It's they're really nice people.
Aww.
And that's what really struck me about it. Even the old man is sort of a nice, underneath it all,
right.
A nice guy.
Well, we will not only watch it, but we will be coding it here at Catch. Well, Malcolm, I cannot thank you enough. I know this has just been a joy for everybody here and all those who will watch it. I miss you and look forward to seeing you in real life before too long. And thank you again for being here. So,
Nolan,
Malcolm,
you are brilliant yourself, as you know. And where's your book? Where's your latest? Is it behind you?
You mean that little book back there, right?
The one that's this thick.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well done. You're absolutely brilliant. I love working with you. It's always fun. And take care. And to all the people listening and watching, I see lots of people sending up things. It's great. The thank yous and also mentioning, of course, that Nick was in Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fudge, and all that. So, yes.
A lot of smart people here. Yeah.
There are a lot of smart people. Thank you so much. Okay. It's a great pleasure. Always great talking to you.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'll have a wonderful rest of the downtime, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, all. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Sabrina.
Bye, Malcolm.
There you are.
How do you turn this damn thing off?
It says leave meeting.